Hey everybody, I'm Jesse and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today we're going to talk about 5 things that were better back in the 80s. I know that the list is a lot longer than that, but I just wanted to take a few things and point out why things were better back in the 80s. Because a lot of younger people don't know, and maybe some of us don't remember why. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and run down this small list of things that I think were definitely better back in the 80s. Number 5, cars. Back in the 80s, in the 70s too, they were easier to work on. Nowadays, cars are just jam-packed with so much crap that a normal average person can't work on them. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing. You pop the hood and you cannot see the ground through there. I remember back when I was a kid, we had a pickup and I was changing the spark plugs in it or something, and I jumped in and stood inside the engine well under the hood. I jumped in there and stood between the tire and the engine on the ground. I stood there and took the spark plugs out. So there was a lot of room under the hood because it was streamlined. They didn't have all this crap piled in there. They were just a lot easier to work on back then for yourself. You could maintain your vehicle yourself with relative confidence. We had, anybody remember the Datsun 280Z? That was back before Nissan bought them. Nissan actually bought Datsun, and then we started getting the 300Z, the Nissan 300Z. But I used to love that Datsun 280Z. That was my favorite car when I was a kid, and I wanted one. Then we had the Camaros and the Chevelles and the Mustangs, and they just looked better back then. Nowadays, it's hard to distinguish one car from the other. I find myself having to look at the emblem and to try to figure out what kind of car it is. Back then, you had no problem with that. They were distinct. Their styles were distinct. They were really good-looking, attractive cars. And even the Ford Pinto, I mean, it looked only like a Ford Pinto. You did not get the Ford Pinto confused with the El Camino or something like that. They were distinct, different cars, and they had their own look, their own style. It was just better. Now, you had your good-looking ones, you had your ugly ones, but none of them looked the same. Now they're all rolling off the assembly line, no matter what country or what brand or whatever, and they all just have a similar look. It seems like, to me anyway. I have a hard time telling the difference between a Hyundai and an Isuzu. Speaking of Isuzu, do y'all remember that commercial where they were in an airport or something, and the guy was maybe they were in a car dealership, and an American guy was trying to pronounce Isuzu, and he kept messing it up. And then the Japanese guy told him, it's okay, I can't say Chebaway. That movie, or that commercial, still cracks me up. It's okay, I can't say Chebaway. But I remember that commercial. It has stuck with me through decades, and I still remember that commercial. But that's another thing. Commercials back then, they put some talent into them, and they made you laugh or made you think. Even the commercials were better back then, I think. But commercials aren't on my list, but you know what I'm saying. Televisions. Yeah, now we've got the big flat screen, and that's the only thing better about a television now is the big flat screen with a good aspect ratio for widescreen viewing and all that. That's great. But back in the 80s and earlier, a TV was a major thing, a major part of your furniture, like a couch or something. And if it quit working, you called a TV repairman. There used to be that was a real respectable occupation. TV repairman. He'd come out to your house and fix your TV. That doesn't happen anymore because we buy stuff and just throw it away if it breaks. And I think that's sad. Number one, it's not good for the environment just to fill up landfills with broken TVs and whatever else. That's not good for the environment. But aside from that, just the TVs, I mean, they could have created them. They could manufacture them in a way that they could be repaired, but they don't because it's more expensive. And heaven forbid Philips or Magnavox or whoever is making them now, that their profits don't rise as much as they should next year because they made their TVs repairable. I mean, everything's just cheap junk made in China now. There used to be a saying about German engineering. I used to hear that all the time when I was a kid. German engineering. The best things on the planet were made in America and in Germany. Now, everything's made in China, almost exclusively. I mean, nothing against China or whatever, but they're being paid bottom dollar to make this stuff, and they're just churning out crap that has an expected life cycle of 5 to 7 years or whatever, and then you go buy a new one. You throw that one in the dumpster. It's a sad fact of life now. Nothing gets repaired. Nothing gets saved and passed down. You know, it's all just cheap plastic and circuitry now. I don't know. Maybe nobody else feels that way, but it just makes me feel sad to see our stuff heading in that direction. I mean, we're already there. I mean, just to see what's happening with the things we buy, the products that we buy. There used to be meaning to them. Now they're just products. One TV's much like the other one, and it'll be thrown away in about the same amount of time and replaced with another one. They all look basically the same. The TVs do. You can't tell a Magnavox from a Philips, from a Sony, or a Samsung unless you go and look at it. You got to look at the little thing. They're all black or gray and the same, basically the same shape. Nothing special about them. Toys. We used to have toys that were strong, just like the TVs were. They were strong. They lasted a long time. Not only were they strong, but they were fun. They were fun to play with, and you didn't need batteries and a screen on them all the time. They were one of my favorite toys of all time was Lincoln Logs. I love those things. Building the log cabins and stuff, and I loved Lincoln Logs. I like those better than Legos probably. I know they still have Legos and stuff, but they can't be as prominent as they were when we were kids. Toys back then were just tougher, and they taught you things, and nowadays it's just like everything else. They're just cheap throwaway crap. After your kid's done with it, you throw it in the garbage and you go get him something else. Or maybe it'll sit in his toy box for a couple years until you throw it away, but whatever, it's the same end result. Toys today don't get passed down to the next kid. They get thrown away. That's along the lines of the TV thing. One person made a comment in our comment section there that he still had his Tonka truck from the 70s or 80s. He still had the metal Tonka truck. That's what I'm talking about. You're not going to have any of this crap that these kids are getting now. They're not going to have it in 40 years, 30 years, whatever. It's going to be junk. They were tougher and they were more fun because you had to use your imagination. They didn't have a screen on them that made the characters, and the imagination was in the circuitry of the machine. The imagination was in our heads. And I think that's missing from today, just kids using their imaginations, because no matter what screen they're looking at, the stuff that they don't have to imagine anymore like we used to. We used to have to make stuff up in our heads. That's gone. Number 2 is restaurants and stuff. I'm gonna lump them together like little small grocery stores and stuff. They used to have those when I was a kid. When we were kids, you used to be able to go sit down in a little restaurant and the owner was there, or he lived in that town or whatever, and the service was great and the food was great, and you could get specialized service because there were real people in there. They weren't just like corporate robots. These big corporations have bought up all of that. IHOP and whatever, now we've got Starbucks, and now they want tips just for grabbing something and handing it to you. I don't know. A coffee is so expensive now that, then you add in $2 or $3 for a tip. Now you're spending $13-15 on a coffee. That just doesn't make sense to me. I get it. People work hard and they deserve tips, but in another sense, I deserve my money too. I mean, if I sit down to a dinner and the waitress or the waiter comes over and checks on us and makes sure we got everything and makes our experience pleasurable, or even just doesn't mess up our experience, then yeah, he or she deserves a tip. But to turn around and grab a cup and put it on the counter in front of me, I mean, come on. I find it difficult. To me, that's just that entitlement. Everybody thinks they're entitled now. Just because you're in a industry that deals with consumables, food or drinks or whatever, it doesn't mean you deserve a tip. What about the rest of the working people? They don't get tips, and a lot of them work harder than anybody at Starbucks. They don't get tips. So I don't know. That's a real, that can be argued. I understand that. Give them a tip, don't give them a tip, whatever. I get it. It just chaps my hide when I see some entitled person demanding a tip, like they've earned it, your money is actually theirs. If it was something, if the state you're in changed the laws and they started making less money, then yeah, I would say, okay, we can help out and help these people. But that's not what's happened. These people just decided that they deserve tips. Starbucks has been around a long time and they didn't get tips. Now all of a sudden they do. And it's not just Starbucks, it's all that stuff. You used to be able to go in there, sit down, and be treated with decency and respect and kindness and know what you were getting. And back then, it was bad or, I don't know, disrespectful to not leave a tip. There was no question about it back then, because there weren't all these entitled people saying, I deserve tips too and all this. Back then, if you didn't leave a tip for good service, you were in the wrong. It was black and white. It was binary. If that waiter or waitress did a good job, they deserved a tip. It was easy, simple, cut and dry. Now it's people are being shamed for not leaving a $3 tip on a $7 coffee. Hey, whatever. And number 1, customer service. Yeah, we all hate customer service now. And the reason we hate it is because huge corporations decided they wanted to save money and send those jobs overseas. Money is the main driving factor of all of our discomfort and loss of freedom, just the headaches we suffer in daily life. It's all driven by money. And this is a prime example of it. They sent all these jobs overseas. But I remember back when I was a kid, you could call some customer service line and actually get a human being who spoke good English, tell them what your problem was, and they would help you. They would resolve the issue. They would be upbeat and helpful, cheerful, a native speaker of your language that you could understand, and they did a good job. They would deserve tips, in my opinion. It wasn't a horrible experience like it is today. It wasn't, the main thing about back then was the wait time. You might have to wait on hold for a long time or whatever before you actually got to speak to somebody. But now, most of it's automated. They'll run you around in circles, talking to this robot voice until finally you can get through and talk to somebody. And then when you do get to talk to somebody, you may or may not be able to understand about 75% of what they're saying. And I'm not knocking the people who are working at these jobs. It's not their fault. If I was in their position, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd get a job if I needed it, talking to Americans. It's not their fault. But we don't have to like it. I don't have to enjoy sitting there talking to someone with a really strong accent who's misunderstanding me and I'm misunderstanding them and trying to muddle our way through my problem. When they started sending all of our jobs overseas, it made life more difficult here in the United States in so many ways. The list is almost endless. Now, if you're in the middle class, very small, shrinking middle class now today, you still don't have the buying power that you had back then. You can't, middle class people can't go just buy a house and a couple of cars, and they can't do that anymore. Even if you are in the middle class, can't do that anymore unless both of you are working. My main point of all this is all this progress and all this technology and all these wonderful things that we have, they're not all they're cracked up to be. All these big screen TVs, yeah, they're wonderful to look at and watch TV on, but they come at a price that we normally don't think about, like landfills piled up with TVs and other electronics, jobs being shipped overseas so that, whatever, Walmart or Amazon can hit their profit goals next year, which I don't understand. I mean, rich is rich. Once you're a billionaire, why the hell do you have to keep grinding and making more? Bring some jobs back. Do something. I don't know. But I'm not a billionaire, so I have no idea what goes through their minds and why they do what they do. All that convenience, all that nice, shiny buttons and flashy lights and all that, they come at a price. And not all progress is a good thing. Just because you're moving forward doesn't mean that things are improving. The road can get worse up ahead. And I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And thanks to all my subscribers. I appreciate you. Please, if you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe and comment. I really enjoy commenting with y'all back and forth. So do that for me if you would. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a cup of coffee, and I'll leave that link in the description. Also in the description will be a link for Gen X gear, like the shirt I'm wearing today. And if you have any ideas for future videos, please let me know in the comments. I like bringing your ideas to life on episodes of Gen X Thinks, so please do that for me. And if you can't or don't want to support the channel financially, you can always support the channel by sharing this video on your social media. Thank you very much. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I'll see you on the next one.